Yay, it worked. Hey guys, I'm Jennifer Stanhinas. Happy New Year. If I haven't seen you yet this new year, try to say hi in the comments. I'm going to go back through and kind of look for stuff later. If you have any questions, feel free to leave me a question. And if you are watching the replay, just type in the comments replay, and I'd love to come say hi and see you a little bit later. So by the end of what we're talking about today, I'm going to go over three pretty big designer mistakes that specifically new website designers make. So this is going to be when you're first taking on clients. I started making a list, and to be honest, there was definitely more than three because I've made more than three mistakes, and I know that there's more out there that we can all learn from. And so I'm hoping that by doing this and kind of being honest with you, and also seeing what I've seen from teaching students and then helping clients and stuff over the years, that these will kind of help just be like, oh, okay, I do that, or like, oh, I've never done that. I'm glad I knew that was something that people did. So make sure everything looks good here. Okay, cool. So another thing is that, like I said, above these three things, I made a list, and there's a few other ones that I definitely want to touch on. And so as of, let's see, it's about 10 days from now, early in a couple of weeks, I am hosting the first, I say first because hopefully there'll be other ones, first free live masterclass for the entire year. So happy new year, way to start the year off right. Like everybody's gotten back in the swing of things now, and so we are ready to go. You can sign up for that at sitemakerstudio.com/class, CLASS. And I am really excited for that. I've been working on it for 3-4 months. I've gotten a lot of feedback on it and been talking to different people, kind of helping me put that together. And so we're going to go through on that class, we're going to go through other mistakes that website designers make, especially really new or experienced. And so I'm happy to speak to those anytime. I'm going to go through my entire website design process, like from literally beginning strategy all the way through the build and the launch, and kind of the steps that I take to do that. You'll learn some other stuff along the way too. So sitemakerstudio.com/class is how you can get registered for that. It's free. It's not some big conference and multiple day thing. It's just like a 1 hour deal that day, and probably be actually, yeah, around the same time of day. So get registered for that. Would love to see you then. So these mistakes are going to keep you, hopefully keep you from getting stuck on a few areas, and I'm hoping it's going to save you a lot of time. So number one, starting with the pretty stuff. So I actually have an email that's going out in a few days, and if you happen to see it, you can write me back on it or whatever. But the title of it is like something along the lines of like, confession, I don't love pretty websites. And then I go in and like explain the whole deal behind that. But I think a lot of times people think that website design is a really creative task, and that like the pretty stuff is just for the designer, and then all of the building and all of that has to be done by a developer. And although those are traditional roles, like the designer would do the look and the feel, and then of course now you have things like UX, UI designers, and all of these other people that come really into the whole picture of a website. But if you are just starting out with the pretty stuff and how the website's going to look, that is a mistake. And again, this is a mistake that I've made before, and it's not something that you can't do at all depending on the project. I would say if it's a project for yourself or things like that, and that's the way you get inspiration and the way you find creativity, then that's fine. But I see this happen again and again and again with people that want to browse Pinterest for ideas, which P.S. that's not even the best place to look if you're going to try to get ideas. If you're here with me, or if you're watching the replay, type ideas in the comments if that's something you have a hard time with. If you either go straight to Pinterest already, or if you have tried to find other sites and you're not really sure where to do that, if you'll type ideas in the comments, I'll come back in and send you a few of my favorite ones that are not Pinterest. I do use Pinterest with clients sometimes, but it's not the first place to start. So that's a lot of the mistake. We want to start with strategy, okay? And again, that may seem like, oh, well, of course, we've got to like think about the pieces that go. But I would challenge you to think how many times when you've gotten on the phone, if you're already accepting clients, when you've gotten on the phone with maybe a potential client, and the first thing, as soon as you hang up with them, you're like just dreaming of all how the site will look. Instead, I want to challenge you to really begin to think behind some of the strategy and like how some of the moving pieces are going to fit and work, and all that part of it. So we want to start with the goals, how it functions. That's another thing I ask clients a lot of times, and I really challenge students to do, is like, what do we want it to actually do? And not just from a sense of like, well, of course we want it to get clients for them or customers, whatever. But I ask people for examples of sites that they like the look and feel of, and then sites that they like how it works. And so I always use the example of like CVS or something. I'm like, I don't care if you think like Walgreens Photo has a terrible maybe looking website, but if you love how easy it is to upload photos or whatever it is, I want you to take note of those type of things. And that's the kind of stuff we want to start a website design project with, is some of the strategy and the goals, function and all that before we get into how pretty it's going to look. And then just a last note for this, if you really want to design a pretty website, I would encourage you to do that maybe for your own portfolio. You could do that as something for, people would call it like a passion project, or maybe if there is a client that you have that maybe is a pro bono client, or maybe they're, what's the term I'm looking for? About the 403c, like a nonprofit. If there's something like that and maybe they are not at the same place to have your normal website package, maybe you get more design creativity and flexibility with a project like that, and that can kind of turn into more of like a pretty site if that's just something that you're dying to do. But we just don't ever want to base our design decisions only on what's going to look good on your site. Please, please, please don't ever make a design decision with a client because it's going to look good in your portfolio. Okay. I've definitely been guilty of, luckily not making the decisions based on that, but definitely having that like in the back of my mind. And as a kick in my own pants, lately I had a client that in the beginning when we were describing her styles, mine and her styles just weren't quite matching up, and selfishly that was a thought in the back of my head, was like, this is not going to be a site that I end up putting in my portfolio, and shame on me. She ended up being literally one of my best clients, and you may even hear about her on the Masterclass if you come. It ended up being great because I stuck to my own process, which I know starts with strategy. So just an encouragement there. Still find ways to be creative, but do not start just with the pretty stuff. Okay. Mistake number 2 is designing for the client. I know that sounds weird. You're like, she misread her notes. No, wait, what? The client's paying you. Yes, correct. But I'm telling you, that is mistake number 2. Do not design just for that client. So I need you as the designer, as the expert that they're hiring, you want to make sure that you are crystal clear on who is going to actually use that website. I always encourage you to dig, a few layers deeper into that. And I taught a class here locally. I was trying to think of the example I gave. I gave like a home health care website. So yes, the person that's going to be looking at the site may possibly be that elderly person, or it may be their current caregiver, a child, an adult child, whatever. But if I was designing a site for that assisted living place or whatever, I've got to know that the person who ultimately is the client making the decision is most likely that adult child, right? They're making that decision to put their elderly parent into a place like that. And so, although we want it to appeal to both people, you've got to know who that final user is. And so if I was just designing for my client, which would be like the assisted living building facility, they're going to tell me a list of things they want and need, and I want to challenge you that that's a mistake to only listen to them. We've got to dig farther and get into to your client's client, basically. So just make sure you're asking the right questions there. Who do they serve? Again, primary, secondary. Another example of this would be like things that cater to a bride and groom. So if you were a wedding venue, you definitely have to sell the bride and the groom. Clearly, they're going to be the ones that make the decision. But if you're anything like me, when I got married, I was blessed enough to have my parents help pay for a lot of the wedding. And so they definitely had to agree that this was the place that was going to be okay to have our wedding. And so I don't think that's changed. I've been married for a while, but I don't think that's changed. And so look into your client's client, and I would encourage you just to do that as a good practice anyway to make you a better designer. But that's mistake number 2, is designing for the client. And again, just be ready to stand up kind of for that person, because they may think they know them, and sometimes it may take extra digging, or some I know other business owners that their entire job is to like interview basically their client's client, and then they include that in their package, things like that. But just constantly be asking yourself what's going to be best for not just your client, definitely not you. So we kind of dismissed you in the first mistake, right? Now we're almost even dismissing that client in the second mistake, and we want to focus really on their client. Mistake number 3, thinking that you have to know how to code. And so I'm going to say just right off the bat, this is simply not true. I do know a little bit of code, and that's taken years to get there, and it's not something I use every day, and it's not something that I need at all to do the work that I do with clients and then to teach the students that I teach. So a very basic knowledge of HTML, CSS. If you need any help with this, just type like code in the comments and I'll come back in, and I've got at least one blog post, maybe a video, and a couple other resources of like some places you could learn a little bit about it that's not going to be completely overwhelming. And a lot of that has to do with, again, just making sure you don't go down this huge rabbit trail and think that you have to like go back to school or get a whole degree in anything to do with coding. So just that basic knowledge will help get you a little farther than you would think. And honestly, I see that question get asked a lot in Facebook groups and stuff, thinking that you need to go back to school or thinking you need a coding degree. Again, this is talking about to do website design. So some of those things clearly are needed for development, but to do the actual designing and even nowadays to do a lot of the building, it can just really limit your thinking, I feel like, to, again, just to think that that's something that you need to have. And I don't ever want you to be in a position, if you love to hand things off to a developer, that's one thing. But if you are designing a site for a client and you feel like just your hands are tied that you have to hand that off to a developer because there's no way you could ever learn to do it because you need code, that's just simply not true. And there's too many good technologies, some of which we'll talk about on the Masterclass. Keep plugging that, but there are just too many good programs and platforms out there that have no need for the code, or they're very low code, and they're just growing. That stuff's not going anywhere. So just want to encourage you to hop on that train and just keep going with what you already know. Don't feel like you need to dig all the way into it. And as an encouragement there too, some of the best website designers that I know, including myself, I think I'm a pretty good website designer, they're completely self-taught. And so they maybe have no background in anything web design or the things that they're doing and related to that. And I would actually argue that about quite a few of the professions these days. So my husband's a developer. He helps develop like apps and software, and he does sales and all those kinds of things. And like, he didn't go to school for any of that. And I think, as we have definitely seen from this past year, as education has just hit the ground and bounced back up again and just completely flipped upside down, I think that's going to continue to be the case. So please don't ever make that mistake of thinking that you have to know code to be able to be a website designer. One thing, so what should you know then first? Like, if you don't need to know code, I would encourage you, and this is kind of, I guess, one of the only action steps from these mistakes, I would encourage you to find and look through some of the commonalities that a lot of websites have. And so if you are wanting to be a website designer, I can already tell, because I know you, that you are looking at websites all the time. You're noticing way more things than your partner or your spouse or your kids or anybody else notice about things. Kind of same thing, like if you do branding, you're like, every awful billboard you see, you're like, or terrible logo, whatever it is. So if you are wanting to become a website designer, start to pay attention to the things that you see repeat in websites, and then know how things, start to, again, pay attention to how things are broken down. So we look at a website as a long page, right? And then it has different sections, and then within those sections, there's things like columns, and within those columns, there's, maybe an image on one side and text on the other. As you start to learn how things like that are broken down, that is going to pay off and give you way better of a head start than feeling like you need to like master a lot of coding. The one thing I will say about coding, that's my analogy that I tell all my students, and a lot of times I even end up telling it to clients too, is that when it does come to code, just literally knowing what HTML, CSS, what those are, and the difference that I explain to them, and I'll tell you, is that HTML is kind of, so it's the code that's behind everything. It's kind of like a naked person. And then CSS, I always say, it would be like their clothing and the things that you use to dress it up. Okay, so if you have to know anything about them, that's a good analogy. And if you ever need any other analogies for anything design related, I can usually come up with them. So let's go back over those three real quick, and I'll let you get on with your afternoon. So mistake number one, starting with the pretty stuff. We don't want to do that at all. Mistake number two, I see people designing for the client only. Make sure you're designing for that client's client. And then mistake number 3, thinking that, especially early on, that you have to know code to even get started. And that one is just simply not true at all. So if this was helpful, please let me know. If you want to become a better website designer, if you are just starting and you want to become a website designer, I know from talking to a few of you all before, I guess even November and December, this is something that's on people's mind, right? You've seen 2020 and all the things that did to a lot of businesses that weren't online, and maybe you saw that opportunity come up. I know definitely I had more inquiries for things, and I know a lot of other designers that did as well. A lot of businesses have realized their need to be online. And so if this is something you've been thinking about doing, or if you already maybe do websites, or you kind of do graphic design or branding and you're wanting to add websites, I would really love to have you show up for the masterclass. You can come live. It's just going to be a better experience altogether. And that's at siteMakerStudio.com/class. So again, that's going to be, I keep looking at the calendar because I'm not even used to seeing 2021. It's weird to write it, type it. Tuesday, January 19th, and I'm going to do it around 12 Eastern. So as long as tech and all of that, kids and everything cooperate, then that's going to be at 12 o'clock that day. SiteMakerStudio.com/class. And I'll be back doing another one of these today's Thursday, next Tuesday, next Thursday, and a few more after that. So stay tuned for those, and thanks for watching. Have a great day.